Hello and welcome to another tutorial on Godot. And last time we created a generative collider for this mesh, which will be our map. And today we'll be adding some artistic effects and I'll be doing footsteps in the snow. So first, to achieve that, I will add a sub viewport. And then under the sub viewport, I would like to add a child node to it, which will be of type sprite 2D. And in the texture of the sprite 2D, you would like to add your footstep texture. It can be a small texture of, let's say 30 by 30 pixels. And I'll load our Godot icon, which is 128 by 128, but I can scale this sprite under the transform property. Here I have scale 1 and 1, but I'll do that later. And so I'll actually copy this sprite and paste it a couple of times into under the viewport, so I can have a lot of footsteps, since I will be taking these footsteps and moving their position around and then fading them out in order to simulate the footstep effect. So now once you have your sprites added, we will go to the mesh instance, and in the shader we created before, I'll add another uniform sampler 2D variable, which will be our viewport mask, or rather our viewport texture. And if we go under mesh instance 3D, we see another variable has been added, and first we should make the resource local, and then we can add a viewport texture from the sub viewport. And now if we check out the map, we can still see that nothing happens. That's because we have our variable defined, but our color is not blended with this new mask. So what we would like to do is, near the albedo variable, we can define a new variable called footprint mask. Once you've done that, you can multiply this footprint mask red, green and blue channels so that the color is blended with the mask. Once you've done this, you can notice that our viewport texture is now blended with this color texture. You can multiply this value in order to make it brighter, and I'll leave it multiplied by 2. And now, to simulate footsteps, we need to add a character to the scene, and so we'll click on node 3D and add a child node of character body 3D. And now once we have this added, we see that we need a collision shape for this body. Once we've added the collision shape, we need to assign a shape to the collision shape object, and I'll assign a capsule shape, and I'll also add a mesh instance to the object and assign a capsule as well, so we can see the character. I'll drag this whole character up a bit. Make sure if you do this, you drag the parent node and not the children node, since then your nodes will be misaligned. Now once you've done this, you can go over to character body and attach a movement script. And I'll just create this. And first off, we need to define a couple of variables, so I'll go ahead and do that. So this variable map will be responsible for our mesh instance of the map. The viewport will be our sub viewport, and our texture will be our viewport texture. The sprites will be our sprites contained in the sub viewport. The points will be the coordinates of each sprite on the map. Here I have a couple of more variables to help us with this process. So let's go ahead and add a couple of functions to the body of our script. And here in the ready function, I'll assign the initial values to some of the variables I've defined earlier. Here we've made sure that the viewport texture is assigned to our map, and now we need to append our sprites to our point array. To do that, I'll write a for loop including all sprites of the sub-viewport. Here, after writing the loop, I also resize the points array according to how many sprites there are in the sprites array. This is done to initialize the points array correctly. So now if we scroll down to the process function, we should add our timer according to our delta. This will be our helper variable so that all of the sprites are drawn at one time. So to do this, I'll add an if statement, and if the timer is more than half a second, I'll increment our counter. And after doing this, I'll check if the counter is more than our sprite size. And here, if it is more than the sprite size, we'll reset it to 0. So now once we have our counter variable ticking, now I'll add logic in order to move each variable at the time the timer is more than 0.5 seconds. Now I'll explain the position and how it's set so you can apply this to your own project. And here I have the array of the points we need to set for the sprites, and we set our position every half a second to the point of viewport texture, and it should be the same size as our texture used for the map color, and it's 1000 by 1000, and we'll set the viewport resolution to 1000 by 1000 in order to match the texture of the map. And now we have the position of the sprite, which is offset by 20 and divided by 40 to put it under the character for both z and x axis. And as you can see, my mesh instance is actually 40 by 40, so it's gonna be offset by 20 and half of this value, and then divided by the whole value in order to get the correct position under the character. Now once you've done this, we can implement the fading of the footsteps. So first, every time we're going to draw the footstep, we would like to make it visible. So I'll access the sprites array of the current counter we're going to draw, and we'll access the modulate property of the alpha channel, and we'll set it to 1, which will mean that the sprite will be fully opaque. After this, we can scroll up and add another function to our script, which will fade each of these sprites bit by bit in the process function. So in order to do this, if we were, let's say, on the 4th sprite and we would fade back, we'd actually fade 4 of these sprites back, but some of these sprites may still be visible, so we actually need to loop over this array like this, and then once we reach 1, we actually need to start from the end of the array, and we should iterate back until we reach our current sprite we're drawing. So I'll do that right now. Now once we've implemented our function, we can scroll down back to the process and put it outside the timer statement, since we want to fade this footsteps every frame. So here I'll add it, and I'll add the variables as counter and sprites. Once you have this, on our character body, assign a map. And so let's assign our map we're going to be using. Now, once you have this function done, you should also reset the timer every time you enter this statement. So I'll set timer to 0. And now in each of these sprites, you can see that the scale is a little bit too big. So I'll make it smaller. Now once you've set the scale to each of your sprites, and now you can try to run the project, and as you can see, every half a second the sprite gets set to the ground, and if you change the texture and scale it down a bit, you can actually simulate footsteps on your map. So thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you have a good day.